Why are human beings so restless? Why does it always seem like we're craving and reaching for things we just can't seem to attain? I'm John Schockel, and this is a Missionary Minute. So I'm on day 19 of Exodus 90, a 90-day program that allows its participants to draw back from the habitual reliance we have on so many physical things and the comforts of the life that we live, and to take a 90-day hiatus from that and go into the desert, so to speak, to go into the desert to be able to seek to do three things better: prayer, asceticism, or drawing back from those physical comforts, and community. So I'm on day 19, and friends, it's boiled a lot of things to the top. It's like an extended Lent. And I wanted to reflect on one or maybe two things that it's brought to my attention. The first is just how much I rely on just the everyday comforts of being able to come home and just sit down on my phone, pop on a show or a movie, watch sports, snack all day. You know, these things that I've definitely taken for granted. But in giving up the snacking and giving up the frivolous time on my phone, I've noticed a kind of restlessness in me. A kind of restlessness that when I sit down, I feel like I want to get distracted by something, and I'm always seeking this kind of immediacy. And I was reminded of what Aquinas said about this. He said that from the beginning of time, there's at least four things that human beings have tried to substitute and to focus on to distract themselves from this kind of restlessness that's built into us. He said the first thing is pleasure. Wine, woman, and song from the beginning of time, Aquinas says. The second thing he mentions is wealth. Always craving to have more. You're a millionaire? Well, he says, because of concupiscence and just original sin built into us, we're going to want to be a billionaire. And the circle goes on. The third thing he mentions is power or control, being able to have authority over everything. And when we don't have this, he says, once again, we feel restless. And even when we do, there's always more. It never really satisfies. It only distracts. And finally, the pursuit of honor, he says, is the final substitute that humans have placed in their lives to distract themselves from this restlessness. So what does Aquinas say about this? He says that ultimately all of these things leave us restless because we're not made ultimately for them. They're instrumental good. So here he makes a distinction between an instrumental good and a final good or ultimate good. These four things he mentions, pleasure, wealth, power, and honor, are instrumental goods, things that instrumentally allow us to take a step forward into something else. They were never supposed to be a part of our lives that we focus on, that we stay static in, that we always turn to, rather that bring us to something else. And what's that something else? He says, ultimately, the source and summit of goodness and happiness, God himself. And so to be able to recognize this in Exodus 90 has been really helpful for me. And I was also reminded by one of the writings of one of my other great heroes, St. Augustine of Hippo. And this writing comes from his Confessions, one of the best books that I've read. If you haven't read it, I urge you to pick it up. And he talks about it in the very opening paragraph of his book, where he says, "Lord, you stir man to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and we are restless until we rest in you." So often in today's world, it seems that we are more than ready to substitute pleasure for the sake of happiness, for immediate distraction for the sake of peace. And I think what Augustine and Aquinas are really trying to flesh out here is that since that we were created by a creator that wants to be in relationship with us, that only when we are in relationship with him and only when we rest all of our thoughts, feelings, and desires, all of our dreams completely on him and hand them over to him, can we actually be fulfilled? Can we actually be satisfied by the living streams that flow from God the Creator? Exodus 90 has brought this to my awareness. And for the next 70 days, this is going to be my particular focus in trying to be able to identify where do I rely too much on pleasure in my life, on seeking wealth, power, or attention from others. And how can I be able to draw back from that and actually pause and say, no, Lord, those will never satisfy me. I will only rest when I rest in you. I encourage you to think about this as well, especially as we get closer to Lent and enter into the season of the desert before Easter. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm John Schockel, and this has been a Missionary Minute.